just not any, there's no contradistinction or comparison between the two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine that's a pretty drastic change.
My joke is obsidian here, it's a color. There, it's a really cool stone to find on the Arroyo.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, so we are online on YouTube, and in a minute or two, we'll have our first follower there. We do have our first follower. So welcome to the YouTube audience. Let me just say that if you want to be connected to any of these sessions going forward, here is the registration email place so that you can register your email, and that will allow you to join our program. Let's see, what view do I have you on?
Can anybody tell me why I can see Nicholas and I can see Jordan,
Right.
and I can see you, Skip, but I can't see me?
You don't have your camera on apparently, so I'm going to ask you to start video.
Okay.
Click that.
Maybe click up on top of the screen.
There you
go. Okay, so when you're on video, then you're going to be on a public recording of this session, and your voice is being recorded also, just so you know that. So at the end of this program, YouTube will automatically put it on the YouTube channel. And let's see. I don't have handy my YouTube channel. You'd think that's the most common thing I would have, but unfortunately it's not that easy. It keeps disappearing on me, but anyway, here it is. I've got it.
Well, to help you out, Skip, people say, what do you mean you don't know your phone number? And I say, well, but I don't call myself. So, so
right,
good for you. So good for you.
I don't think of, okay, so this is the YouTube channel. I'm saying to panel. If you're on the YouTube channel already watching us live, then you already know what the YouTube channel is. And so let me just give a little introduction here. We are doing a 1-year-long exercise in understanding the Tarot as a roadmap for life. Now, why am I doing it on a Carl Jung depth psychology reading group? The reason is that, first of all, especially the major arcana in the Tarot are the archetypes of the collective unconscious, as discussed by Dr. Jung throughout his work. And so what we're doing here is we're going through each of the major arcana, and then we'll decide how we're going to go through the minor arcana. But each of the major arcana and just discussing it threadbare down to everything that it could possibly relate to. And in that way, we will set in your mind, if you're watching this, and if you watch this all the way through, you will set in your mind exactly what this card means in the Tarot. And so at the end of this year, if you want to be an expert at Tarot divination, you will know plenty. Okay, it's possible to do Tarot divinations on a very superficial level, and it's also possible to do Tarot cards on a very superficial level, which we'll discuss in some detail tonight. But the purpose here is just to identify these things in your own life so that you know what they're about. And some of them are a little obscure, and the Lovers happens to be one of the more obscure ones, surprisingly. And So at the end of it, at the end of tonight, you will understand a lot about the lovers, and then you'll spend the rest of your life building out on that idea, those ideas. But and so the idea is that in every religion and every mystic tradition, there is a series of steps that you go through to develop yourself psychologically. That's what it's about. So in the Abrahamic religions, we have the 10 Commandments, the laws given to Abraham, or Moses is given to Moses on Mount Sinai. And by our pastors and rabbis and our priests giving us those lessons and talking about those stories, our psyche builds into those stories, and then they become ours. But the same thing happens in every religious tradition. So, for example, the Bhagavad-Gita offers advice to young people. It's basically the archetype of the humble hero. And so Mohandas Gandhi was always referring to his Bhagavad-Gita, but I found that the Bhagavad-Gita really sounds like Jungian psychology, soup to nuts. And so I began to read it because some people have said awful things about it in the Christian church, and those are all wrong. It is not a work of the devil. It's simply a way that society, that culture developed understandings about how a human being develops psychologically. And it so happens that that's what the Tarot is also, leaving aside the divination aspect. So if you're interested in divination, in every one of these Tarot lessons, you'll find a link to a playlist that I did in 2017, 2018, where I taught a superficial level of Tarot divination, but enough for you to stump the stars and convince your friends that you can divine their what they're thinking, and it's genuinely true that you can. It's not a mystic thing. It's not a magic thing. It's the way your psychology works, and I explain that entirely in that. Well, maybe not entirely, but anyway, I described that in that playlist, which has 18 shorter form videos. So the purpose here, though, is to make sure that we have a complete grasp of every one of the major arcana, and then we'll look into what we're going to do about the minor arcana. But basically, if you know where you are, you're going to know also what you need to individuate, which is one of the key things in Jungian psychology. And I will tell you that I was wrong. I always thought that the key to individuation would be to get to the top of any of the Tarot suits. In other words, become the king and queen, or the king or queen and or queen, get to that top level in one of the suits. But I was wrong about that, because in order to have wholeness, you need to get to the top of all four suits. And so I've changed my approach to that quite dramatically. And so, and I can show you why very simply. You know, if it's sort of like, if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And so if what your specialty is discernment and splitting things up, then everything's going to look like something that has to be split up. And that doesn't get you to wholeness. That gets you to a place where you've got hamburger, basically. And our president is the poster boy of the suit of coins, which is is one of the suits, because he's achieved everything that people who live entirely extroverted and think that, if I get a yacht, a fancy car, I get the country to provide me with a beautiful blue airplane, and everybody plays a band when I walk through, and I have a trophy wife, then it's based on the idea that the one that dies with the most toys at the end wins. Well, in point of fact, you don't win. And the reason you don't win is because there's never enough, and it doesn't bring you happiness. And so, whatever can be said about the President of the United States, I don't think there's anybody that can convince me that he's a happy man. And so in order to have wholeness, he needs to cultivate these other areas that are found in the Tarot suits. But tonight we're going to talk about the Lovers. And you may think that the Lovers is about getting married, and that's what it is. And in many of the Tarot books that come with Tarot decks, that is what it's about. Now, the traditional deck that everybody seems to know is the Rider Waite deck. So I'm going to just show the Rider Waite card here first, and this is the traditional Rider Waite card for the Lovers. Now, I'm not going to leave it up there long. I just wanted to remind you, or set in your mind, what the Rider Waite card looks like. But what I do want to do is show you the Marseille deck. And the Marseille deck is the first deck that we can identify. And I got, a few weeks ago, I got a limited edition reproduction of the Marseille deck as found in various museums around Europe. They went and found all the cards and they digitally reproduced them. And so this is the Lover in the Marseille deck. And mind you, in the Marseille deck, they say the Lover. And let's see, one thing I ought to do before that, though, I'm going to save that for a minute, but it's l'amoureux, or vreux. I don't know if anybody can pronounce the French on that. That would be terrific. One thing I did want to do first, though, which I have begun each of these sessions with, is to begin with Stephen Haller's book, The Fool's Pilgrimage. And so I want to maintain stability on how I've presented it over weeks. And so here I'm going to share Stephen Haller's page on the Lover, which I regard as pretty superficial. But the reason I wanted to share this is because 9 months from now, when we get through the basic meanings of the cards for the first time, and here you see the Rider Waite card, we're going to connect up all of those cards with the Kabbalah, with astrology, and possibly with alchemy also. And these are all areas that Dr. Jung worked on. And I think we said on October 26th, Nick Lawrence, who's with us tonight, will be doing, after we get through the first sort of cycle, which sort of ends at the Wheel of Fortune, Nick is going to give us a talk about the Kabbalah. And we've already had a talk about the Kabbalah from Eva Rider on the 29th of August. So you can find that session with Eva on the YouTube channel. But let me begin with Stephen Haller. And so
Nice.
you have a comment first before I do? Nick?
Let's get through this and we'll see if anything comes up.
Okay. All right. So this is short. Okay. This is what Stephen Haller says. And he points, the reason I put this up is because he points out that this is the path of the lovers, which is an energy path. And it's called Sein in the Kabbalah. And so here we're, by the way, and correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, but here we're not talking about the Kabbalah of Jewish mysticism per se. What we're talking about is the Kabbalah. I read somewhere this week that it's the Kabbalah that Protestants put together to attract Jews to the to the mystical tradition. And
yeah, so there are 3 different kinds of Kabbalah, and they'll always
Right.
be spelled differently. But with a K, it's traditional Jewish Kabbalah. With a Q, it's Hermetic Kabbalah, and with a C, it's Christian Kabbalah.
okay.
So yeah, in this tradition, it would be Q, and that's with a kind of Hermetic flavor.
Right. And so
there's
would you define Hermetic for us?
So those would be any of the people that were following the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus. So
Okay. So basically the alchemists and those sorts of people.
precisely.
Right. Okay. So the mystics. Okay. So this is what Heller says, and I'm just going to read it because some of the people that are involved in this just listen. So the lovers, the 6th arcanum, a nude male and female figures stand in an open field while an angel hovers overhead. The man stands for the animus, masculine soul component, while the woman represents the anima, female soul component within the individual. The two must be reconciled and united in a fitting manner, and this work is accomplished through angelic guidance. Behind the woman is the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the symbolic of living nature, eros, while behind the man is the tree bearing flames, symbolic of the intellectual spiritual nature, logos. A high mountain looms in the background, indicating further summits the pair is to climb together. The noonday sun of divine illumination shines overhead, sustaining human and angelic nature alike. And then he says, Zion, the 17th path from Tippereth to Bina. And so Tippereth would be the number 6, this here, right, Nick?
Yeah.
And this is Bina here. And so Tippereth means beauty, as I'm starting to understand. And Bina means knowledge.
Bina means understanding.
Understanding, okay. So the keynote, from a position of balanced illumination, consciousness now travels to the restrictive and often sorrowful state of profound understanding. Such an experience can best be faced if the inner opposites of the soul are completely reconciled and constant guidance from the higher self, holy guardian angel, is available. The motto, when you make the male and the female into a single one so that the male will not be male and the female not be female, then shall you enter into the kingdom. And that's the Gospel of Thomas, Logion 22. Now, one other thing that I want to draw everyone's attention to here is that we're not talking about, in this case, we're not talking about a separate man and woman or any two people as lovers. We're talking about the animus and the anima in each single individual. This is what he's referring to. So meditation, as I ascend into the regions of my true nature, I must renounce all that does not pertain to the supernal worlds. So the supernal worlds are the ones above, the spiritual worlds. May I have the judgment and discernment to make the right choice. May my mind be enlightened by angelic guidance and divine illumination so that I may choose between the important and the unimportant, even the supreme good and the lesser good. Judgment of supernal conscience will smite me if my choice is not right. Come, enlightening presence of my indwelling guardian, and show me the way to the holy wedding chamber of the soul, where I shall wed the counterpart of my being. Only by uniting myself in mystic marriage with my twin shall I be found whole and fit to enter the kingdom. Love and wisdom will make me worthy to pass the gates of judgment and permit me to enter the empire of boundless light. So that's that. Any comments on this so far? Go ahead, Jordan.
And this may be a question for Nick too, because you made a wonderful point, Skip, with the lover in the Marseille deck rather than the lovers, plural, the singular.
Yeah, and I'm coming back to that, but
right, and the lover singular to me is a very clear indication of individuation, the process of psychosynthesis. And so my question really, or my statement is, I mean, Hermes Trismegistus is the thrice born. And if you look at the Marseille card you put up, there are three characters under the sun indicating a trinity of self of the three together. And my thought is that the thrice born in the trinity within oneself is as the initiation process, the modus operandi of the initiation process, that trinity within each moment. And Tifereth is beauty. 3 is the first number of self-supporting structure. 3 is the first number of Venus, of beauty. And then Bina, being understanding, is then a conscientious, in a sense, acquisition or discovery of the treasure of the experience of unity. And that's the individuation process to move from step to step to step. So I guess I'm making more of a statement, but maybe to speak to Nick with the Kabbalah, I did a 22-month study with a group in Denver on the paths, but this one specifically, that the Marseille, not my deck, not Rider Waite, not even Thoth. This particular image that Skip has up, that trinity of characters to me is so indicative of the thrice born in each action, that is that knowing, that understanding of the beauty in the lovers equals reciprocality. That there's a complete identity there, it feels. I think I'm making more of a statement. I'm not asking a question, but maybe you could respond to my statement.
Well, I mean, that's a start. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to look at this. And
Yes.
That's why we're taking 2 hours at it instead of 5 minutes.
Yeah, I think there's a major difference in the symbolism between the Marseille deck and any of the other decks, really. This one has more to do with kind of exiting the parental realm and coming into your own realm with your own love relationship with somebody. We've got Eros shooting a young man with a dart here. his mother on the left holding him while he's reaching towards his lover on the right hand side of the card. And that's a pretty significant difference from all the other symbolism in the Rider Waite deck. I can't think of the Thoth deck. I can't call it before me right now.
Well, I'm going to bring that up later.
Okay.
Well, and you mentioned Eros, and so is it Eros, Agape, and there?
Sure, but aren't Eros and Agape two different?
What I can tell you is that there's a heck of a lot here. So let me just say now that I'm going to read from Alejandro Jodorowsky's and Marianne Costa's The Way of the Tarot, the spiritual teacher in the cards. And throughout this book, he's referring to the Marseille deck. So it's this is the first deck that was developed. And so, hold on just a second. I need to look at one comment that's made. Okay, so Hassan says, just join, can we have a quick summary of what has been discussed? The answer to that is we barely have begun, so we really cannot stop and do that. And there will be a playback available within an hour after we've finished, so you can replay the start of this. What did you say, Jordan?
I said good call.
Yeah. All right.
All right. So this
early
is on time, and on time is late.
Right. So Hassan, this next passage is going to tell you a lot about what we're talking about, and specifically about this card, which is quite an important card in the whole understanding. And so that's what I'm going to, this will be an overview again, in a way. So, and this is a several minute reading, but I apologize for that. All right, so this was published in about 1930, I think. Let me just look. Oh, I'm sorry, it was published, it's copyrighted 2004, okay, so maybe it's more recent than that, I'm sorry. But anyway, this is quite a smart man's and woman's interpretation. So this is L'Amoureux, the lover, union, and emotional life. The name of this card is not, as often thought, the lovers, plural, but the lover, singular. However, on it, we see four human-shaped figures, the three individuals and the angel, and taking it further, two more entities that are the earth and the sun. Among them, who is the lover? The central figure that is often interpreted to be a young man, the figure on the left, whom some view as a transvestite, or even the angel, the little Cupid aiming his arrow from the sky. These questions arise because Arcanum 6 is, along with the Tower, one of the most ambiguous cards in the Tarot, and one of those that is most poorly understood. 6 represents in Tarot numerology the first step into the square of heaven, which he discusses separately on other pages. It is the time when we stop imagining what would please us to begin doing what we like. So in other words, up until this stage of psychological development, we've sort of been in participation mystique with our parents, or we've been projecting outside of us gods and so on. But now we're stepping into life. So this is sort of early maturity, I guess. And the major tone of this card concerns pleasure and emotional life. This is the very reason why it is so complex and so rich in conflicting meanings. It opens the field to countless projections, and 1,000 meanings can be attributed to it. each of which can be right at a given moment. What is taking place with this trio is a quarrel, haggling, a choice, a union. Okay, that was a question. What is taking place with this trio? Is it a quarrel, haggling, a choice, a union? The two figures on the left are looking at each other, while the one on the right is looking off into space. The whole of humanity can be comprehended through this card. The relations of its protagonists are extremely ambivalent. Now, the key words that they offer here for this card are eros, heart, choice, emotional domain, conflict, ambiguity, trial, social life, community, siblings, doing what you love. Okay, so the position of these three figures' hands is extremely interesting to observe. 5 hands in various positions symbolize the complexity of the relationship in play. The first figure on the left has placed her hand on the second one's shoulder in a gesture of protection or domination, either pushing him forward or holding him back. Her right hand is touching the hem of the boy's tunic. The movement of her extended index finger can be interpreted as a desire to slide over to his penis, or, to the contrary, a prohibition on doing so. The boy has his right hand pressed against his belt. In passing, we should know that this yellow belt has 3 bands and is the same as that worn by the woman on the left. But who is the owner of the arm touching the belly of the young woman? She and the boy are both wearing clothes with deep blue sleeves that are so closely matched it makes the movement of this arm ambiguous. In some way, they make this a commonly shared arm. While the young man is touching the young woman's belly close to her genitals, his gaze is directed away from her toward his right. The card will have an entirely different meaning if we consider this arm to be her own arm protecting or pointing toward her belly, while the boy is holding his arm behind his back. The woman on the right is wearing a headdress consisting of 4 5-petal flowers. It could represent a splendid awareness, poetic yet nevertheless solid. The violet heart of the flowers concentrates the wisdom of love, truly the ability to sacrifice oneself. The woman on the left is wearing a crown of green leaves. It is active, the red band, and if we agree that these are laurel leaves, we could say that she has the mentality of a victor or a dominatrix.
I think it's also worth pointing out that if it's a laurel tree, I think that that's part of probably the cypress family, and that kind of lumps in with all of the Aphrodite symbolism.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Right.
If you would quickly add to Bob Place of the Alchemical Tarot, and his site has a wonderful chart of 1, 2, 3 and cards looking in terms of directions. And here it would be one left, unconscious, looks to the union pair on the right.
Okay. So we can speculate infinitely on the relationship of the 3 figures. A boy presenting his fiancée to his mother, a woman discovering her husband with his mistress, a man attempting to choose between 2 different women, or as the traditional interpretation views it, between vice and virtue. A pimp offering a prostitute to a passerby, a young girl asking her mother for permission to wed the boy she has chosen, a mother in love with her daughter's lover, a mother preferring one of her 2 children over the other, and so forth. The interpretations are inexhaustible. All of them lead us to the conclusion that the lover is a relational card that depicts the beginning of social life. It is the first arcanum on which several individuals are presented at the same level. The Pope's disciples are smaller than he is and seen from the back. That was the previous card, the Hierophant. This is a card of union and disunion, of social and emotional choices. Several clues present in the card direct us toward the notion of union. On the one hand, the number 6 is associated with a letter in the Hebrew alphabet, Vav, nail, which represents union. On the other hand, we can see patches of color, light blue, then red, between these individuals' legs that also represent a continuity, a union between them. On the symbolic plane, we could say that the 3 figures represent the governing centers of the human being, the intellect, the emotional center, and the sexual center, joining together to become one. The ground beneath these individuals' feet has been plowed. This means that in order to reach the 6 arcanum, it is necessary to have performed some preliminary psychological, cultural, and spiritual work. This is how we manage to realize what we love and what we want. The red shoes of the central figure are the same as those worn by the Fool and the Emperor. They can be considered as 3 stages of the same thing. It can also be noted that the ground ends between this figure and his neighbor on the right. There is only the red patch. We can then see them as representations of the animus and the anima, two masculine and feminine aspects of one single person. The spelling amavru, with the V instead of a U, creates a visual sonorous link to the word Dieu in La Maison Dieu, the God house, the tower. We could say that the sun spilling its rays upon this scene represents the great cosmic lover, the deity as the source of the universal love that guides us to conscious and unconditional love. The small Eros serves him as a messenger and suggests to us, because of his depiction as a child, that his love is perpetually renewing. Now, there's a couple more sections to this, about a page and a half, but let me stop there for a minute and just see what comments you have before I go on.
If I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
The blue in the sun would typically represent the emotion burgeoning forward and development. And then the green would be the growth across experience of life. The red would simply be the life itself, but it's an interesting point you made right towards the end of the only place there is the ground is in that interstice, that psychic synapse, the middle place between on either side of his legs or her legs. And I'm going to stop right there. This card is so fecund, and any way you run an interpretation, it just continues. And I'll stop right there.
Right. Okay. So, Nick, did you have anything you wanted to say, or Maria?
Well, I think that it's occurring to me now for the first time, after having looked at this card several times before, that this has to symbolize the myth of Psyche and Eros. And I think that that's really interesting, for one thing, and also secondly, I'm thinking, how could it be interpreted from a Jungian perspective? And it makes me think about his writings, where he's talking about kind of Jung and even Freud to a certain extent, their writings on kind of having to wrest the libido out of the mother complex, out of the kind of hieros gamos that you've had with your mom or your parents, and to then apply that to finding your own love. And I think that that fits really well with this card. Not so much with any of the other versions, definitely not the Rider Waite version, but
right. Well, I do want to talk about duality and the syzygy and so on in a bit. That would be part of the Jungian aspect of this. But
if I could quickly piggyback on Nick's comment, I mean, Nick, that's relatively brilliant, because the psyche and the eros components naturally transcend the parent, because part of the initiation is the child becoming the parent of the man. So each and every process of individuation, each and every milestone is just simply that next step in where you are evolved. And with the psyche, especially capital P, psyche, her, and eros pieces, that really plays some interplay into this card alone.
Yeah, I mean, for that reason, I think the Marseille is a preferable deck to some of the other ones. I mean, if you're trying to put the Jungian lens on it.
right,
Yes.
and as you'll see, some of these decks are rather superficial on this, you know, and they simply accept the idea that it's about, you know, you're going to have a love affair, or there's, you know, you're going to have a new relationship or something. A reader would often just say something like that. You know,
And Skip, to go back into the Marseille, I mean, it's a matter of the Trinity, the first structural shape, the triangle, the first structural concept of beauty occurs at every point along the path of individuation. And so this card, to me, is kind of a radar blip through every single card. And I mean, I could almost transcend it through justice and balance the heart against the feather and come out with a seed of temperance, where there's the magical mixing. So
okay, well, let's not get
and
too,
I'll stop there.
let's not get too complicated here. Let's just at this point, I just want to try to understand the lovers, right, without really understanding how they all fit together. We'll get to that. Okay, so there are a couple of comments here. One from Soror Tamori. In the Thoth deck, the Hierophant is initiating the wedding, which in this card I see as the holy guardian angel. So that aligns with the explanation you read earlier. Nice. I see the Hierophant as the higher guardian angel as well. I just feel that people lost their own personal connection, so went through a priest for many years. And yeah, and I didn't really talk too much last week about the negative aspect of the Hierophant that I see. I mean, I always saw the Hierophant as a fairly negative card because I have issues with organized religion, but nonetheless.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah, and so let me just read the rest of what Jodorowsky says. In a reading, this ambiguous card prompts us to question our own emotional state. How is our emotional life going? Are we enjoying peace or experiencing conflict? Are we doing what we love? What place does love hold in our lives? Does the situation that is our chief concern have roots in our past? And if so, what are they? This card can refer to questions concerning the place we've been assigned within our family unit, and to work identifying the projections we cast on those now around us. The lover will be one of the figures on the card, chosen by the subject of the reading, whose relations he and she can analyze. Whatever the question may be, it will be helpful to remember that the central lover remains the large white glowing sun, which sheds its light on all living things without discrimination. Okay, I think that's a terrific point. The central lover is the white sun. Okay, so then Jodorowsky projects if the lover spoke. So I'm going to read this. This is one of the reasons why I like what he did here. I am the son, it says, if the lover spoke, quote, I am the son of the arcanum, the white sun, almost invisible, but casting my light upon all the figures. I am this star, the joy of existing and the joy that the other exists. I live in ecstasy. Everything fills me with happiness. Nature, the entire universe, the existence of the other in all its forms. This other who is none other than me. I am the awareness that shines like a bright living star in the center of your heart. I renew myself in every moment. At each instant, I am being born. At your every heartbeat, I am uniting you with the entire universe. It is from me that come the infinite connections, joining you to all creation, all the pleasure of living, all the pleasure of becoming one. Ah, the pleasure of doing what I love, messenger of the permanent impermanence. I am reborn every second. I am like a newborn archer launching arrows at everything his senses can capture. There's about 50 traditional interpretations, which I'm going to pass on, but then I am not kindness. I am not ambition for well-being or triumph. I am unconditional love. I will teach you how to live in wonder, recognition, and joy. When I enter you like I enter the figures of the arcanum, I communicate divine love to the smallest of your cells. I blow across your mind like a hot hurricane that eliminates from your language all criticism, aggression, comparison, spite, and the entire scale of pride that separates the spectator from the actor. I insinuate myself into your sexual energy to soften all brutality and all traces of conquest and possession. I confer to pleasure the sublime delicacy of an exploding angel. When I dissolve in your body, it is to detach you from the dictatorship of mirrors and models, the gaze of others, the pain of comparisons. I permit you to live your own life and assume your own light and beauty. In the heart where I dwell, I drive out the illusions of the unloved child. Like the bell tower of the cathedral, I spread the penetrating vibrations to love in your blood, stripped of all resentment, all emotional demands that have become a travesty of hatred, and all jealousy, which is only the shadow cast by abandonment. I initiate you into the desire of obtaining nothing that is not also for others. The island of the ego is transformed into an archipelago. Everything works in concert to increase my joy, even what you interpret as negative circumstance, mourning, difficulty, pettiness, obstacles. I love things and beings as they are with their infinite possibilities of development. At every instant, I see them, and I am ready to take part in their blossoming, but also to accept that they remain as they are. Okay, so that's Jodorowsky. Any comments after that? I'll bring us down to got a review here. So go ahead, Jordan.
What I love about especially that passage of Jodorowsky is that, to me, then we switch up what we've talked about before about that pair of characters on the left, and we focus then on the middle character, and that middle character then is indicated to be the capital A, all, A-L-L. And rather than the lovers with an S, plural, the middle character becomes the lover, you, capital Y-O-U. And you're then connected to the all at that place of in between in individuation.
Right. So Sir Tamori says, I can understand that I cringe a bit with decks that use a Catholic priest as the Hierophant. I think that's healthy.
I think that's very healthy.
Yeah.
I'll second that.
Yeah, I think we could. Well, I mean, others have brought some wit into that, but that was last week's session. So you can refer back to last week's session.
I get it already. That's good
Right.
stuff.
Okay, so one of the things that I wanted to comment on here is that it strikes me, and I think I'm striking out on my own a bit here, but it strikes me that this card really represents the syzygy. It represents the essence of all syzygies. In other words, all pairs of opposites. Because I don't know where the pairs of opposites come in to the tarot other than here. And maybe if you have any thoughts on that, that would be welcome. Go ahead, Jordan.
I would say this is the first card where the Mysterium Conjunctionis, the syzygy, enters the deck. I mean, the Magician, the first spark, Inception, the High Priestess, Conception, Empress carries to full term, Emperor establishes place, still not identity. The Hierophant brings the spirit to the earth. At the Lovers is the first part. You have the first implication of an individualized identity that can then now proceed through the process.
Okay, so I want to emphasize that the syzygy has been discussed in every human society for thousands of years, and so I want to start with the Taoist image of the yin and yang. And so here we could say that this circle represents the individual, and the male and female symbols represent that anima and animus part of ourselves. But in terms of our relationships and in human relationships, marriage is about finding your other half and having someone who can interpret the half of the world that you don't really get very well. And of course, this image is actually rotating. And in this case, it would be rotating in a counterclockwise direction, so toward the unconscious. And there are many different versions of the yin and yang. I can show you one other here that gives you a sense of it, because the pairs of opposites are layered down in the psyche. So this is an idea that is in Jungian psychology. And so here you see that within the main yin and yang symbol, there are actually smaller and smaller and smaller yin and yang symbols. And there are many other versions of yin and yang, but this gives you kind of a sense of it. And another thing I wanted to talk about here was the syzygy, as Edward Edinger talked about it in the Ion Lectures. And so I have an image of the syzygy that he put in his Ion Lectures. And his basic idea of it is that you are yoked together. And so, and yoke also refers to yoga. And so yoga is obviously in Hinduism and Buddhism and many ideas from the East. But the idea is that, both sides of the psyche, the Cain and Abel, because this is also referred to as the card of Gemini. So it's it's the twins in the psyche that are the other, that interact, and they are yoked together. There's no separating them, in the same sense that the yin and yang cannot be separated, and that the Tao is the line that goes down between the two, which is infinitely small. So the syzygy, as Edinger is presenting it to us, is that certain dualities, in this case anima and animus, are yoked together, and together they're drawing the wagon of life, let's say, something like that. Any comments on those things?
Yeah, I think there's something that's really interesting about, I didn't bring this up because I didn't really know how to put it into context last week, but in the Hierophant card, I'm pretty sure that the Hierophant or the Pope or whoever wears a head garment coming down around his ears, and that's called a yoke. And his hat also is an egg. So that whole yoga unison idea. And also the first card, the Fool, which we haven't talked about, but the Hebrew letter for that is Aleph, and it also
Aleph.
ox. So the whole symbolism of ox and yoke and everything is playing itself out in this first 7 cards really well. And I think right here we see these two opposites perhaps not yet conjoined. But then in the next card, the Chariot, that card is all about the unification of opposites, and that Chariot has the lingam and the yoni on it as well.
Right. And I do agree that I was looking ahead for the Chariot also, and the Chariot does, stick them together in an actual yoke. Go ahead.
If I may, I mean, the Chariot is the usefulness of the hydrocarbon. It's a very toxic chemical that is now, you step on the gas and it goes. So you are uniting the opposites, in that you have contained a system of toxicity that is not toxic any longer, because it's now it's workable, it's utilizable. And it's funny, you mentioned,
except that it creates a poison, right? So you're saying that the modern chariot is the automobile, but it still has a toxic aspect to it.
Yeah, the vehicle or the vessel.
Right. Yes, and has an exhaust. Everything has and to me, that's really a metaphor for everything has a consequence.
Right.
I mean, thinking small is easy. It just simply has consequences. Well, thinking big has easy as well. It just simply has consequences.
Right.
So it's a matter of scale, but that then goes back to your white and dark, where you put Venus and Mars. Honestly, I have to say I've never seen that before, and I really like it.
Where did I put Venus and Mars?
In the yin yang symbol.
Okay.
Those are just symbols for male and female, but there again, pulling on mythology, I think that's got to do with the myth of Ares and Aphrodite.
Yeah.
Well, it does, except that I would jump to Estrella or Pallas Athena, who makes Mars look like he's playing checkers to her chess.
Okay, well, let's not get
hold on, but on your yin yang, you put the Venus and the Mars, and I've always thought of the yin yang of so far into the dark that you find the light, and so far into the light that you find the dark. But I can't believe I've never actually attributed the male or female to that. So thank you, because that was a nice attribution just in my own work, to see the black and the white, the dark and the light.
Right. And I just want to emphasize that we're talking about, in part here, about a psychological development. In divination, it comes down, and lots of these tarot deck makers have been relatively superficial in the sense that they're talking only to divination, and they're not talking to psychological development per se.
Yes.
But, okay. And so when in a divination, you may be talking about, depending on what your intuition tells you as you're doing a reading, you may be talking about a relationship. But so far, what we're talking about is a relationship that's internal and from a psychological development point of view. So I want to go back now to Edinger, and when he was talking about the first separation of the opposites and the first syzygies. Okay.
Before you do, Skip, if I can, I couldn't be with you more, because to me, the divination process is directly expressive of individuation at all kinds of scales. And people superficialize it. They do lots of things with it. But if I'm going to talk about intuition and imagination, beyond a deep place within that has fluid fluency, I'm coming from there. And you are absolutely on the point that the individuation is the key. And to me, at that point, divination becomes a synonym rather than a subset.
Right. Well, okay. From a Jungian point of view, divination individuation is the objective.
Well, it's a path of life.
Right.
I mean,
it
you
is
can't
the
not
path of
do
life.
it.
Right.
You either avoid it or you engage it.
Right. And Jung's point is that if you don't engage it, it's going to drag you along anyway.
As he says, contents stuffed strongly enough are
Right.
no longer shadow. That is the nature of evil. I mean, they will come back up.
Right.
So resurgently strong.
Yeah, and I think I could actually put my finger on the quote here, since I have. Go ahead.
Can I make a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
In the Old Testament Bible, we had plenty of psychotic fathers who killed their sons on altars. And we had plenty of psychotic events that were just simply intensities of individuation expressed allegorically or metaphorically. But then in the New Testament, they're all gone, and all of a sudden the devil shows up. The devil was not in the Old Testament. So it's strange to me that all of a sudden there's this evil present that was never present before.
No, wait a minute. That's not right, because in Job, we have the God making a bet with the devil. So he was definitely.
Wasn't that the origin, though, of that incident of that coming into the language?
I think the difference between the Old and the New Testament is the New Testament marks the birth of Jesus Christ, right?
Sure.
And consciousness. Right.
Yeah. So also, the opposite was born at that point as well. So outside
basically the birth of consciousness.
Right. But Job 500 years before was differentiating. Okay. So in the individuation process of the Jewish people, the Old Testament represents the individuation of the Jewish people, the first half up to Job and up to the Psalms and so on. The first half is participatio mystique. And then after that, after Job, you start to get individual prophets and individuals who are contributing.
Not to sidetrack that, because that's a whole nother topic. Frankly.
Well, and I've read the entire text of the Bible and the Psyche into this YouTube channel, so you can find the playlist of it in the YouTube channel and listen to me read the whole thing, cover to cover. So anyway, and so Noel Mark says the difference between Satan and the devil, perhaps Job referred to him as Satan. Okay, well, you know, I'm not a theologian and I'm not going to get into a theological argument, but from a psychological point of view, Job was recognizing that there was a dark side to God, and that he could negotiate with it, and without giving up his faith in God. And that was the point of the bet. So
you could even close that with the devil. I mean, the intense earthly desires, the cast down from heaven to the earthly desires, and then period on the end of the sentence. Stop right there for another topic. Comfortability with your own intensities, instead of abstracting.
Okay, well, Jordan, let's not get too abstract here. We're talking about the tarot, and
no, I mean the devil card, which comes next.
No, it
comes
does
soon up.
It comes, but it comes 7 weeks from now or more.
Well, and I think that's so where I'll stop, because there's an interplay between all the cards, and I'll stop to pull that back there and I'll play pause.
Okay, so we're talking about the lovers tonight. Let's focus on that. But in terms of what you were saying about the individuation process, what Jung was saying in Answer to Job, I'm reading from Answer to Job, paragraph 746. And he's talking about, here's what he says. The conscious realization of what is hidden and kept secret certainly confronts us with an insoluble conflict. At least this is how it appears to the conscious mind. But the symbols that rise up out of the unconscious in dreams show it rather as a confrontation of opposites, and the images of the goal represent their successful reconciliation. Something empirically demonstrable comes to our aid from the depths of our unconscious nature. It is the task of the conscious mind to understand these hints. If this does not happen, the process of individuation will nevertheless continue. The only difference is that we become its victims and are dragged along by fate toward that inescapable goal, which we might have reached walking upright if only we had taken the trouble and been patient enough to understand in time the meaning of the noumena that cross our path. So the point of that passage is that by understanding the ideas that are within the tarot, then we can understand the noumena that cross our path, and we can give them meaning in our own lives, which is what psychology and Jungian psychology is all about. Okay, so now I want to go back to Edinger. And
before you do, if I may, your yin yang actually speaks right to that. The noumena that cross the path.
Right.
That's actually a beautiful end game statement of Jung's passage in Answer to Job, because at that point, then capital S self becomes chthonic numinosity. This is the actuated depth. Yeah, I'll pause.
Okay. I'm going to leave that because I've done 1,100 other videos on those topics in detail.
As well.
Okay. And what I want to draw everyone's attention to, though, because I'm drawing attention to the syzygy and to the idea of duality, I want to talk about the first existence of duality, because the human psyche has been developing over time. the Old Testament, the New Testament, and our modern age, and now our postmodern age, have all been amplifications and further development of the human psyche and the situation. But they all point back to what I'm going to read now, which is the emergence of the first syzygies, which are the first separations of ideas that came into the human mind, and then creatures that were pre-human started to see that they could make differentiations, and they wouldn't be only in participation mystique, which is what all species are up until the point where they start to recognize duality. And so this is, and this comes from Gnosis. Okay, and I'm reading from chapter 1 of Edinger's book, The Ion Lectures. There it is. And the Ion Lectures begins with this. The idea of the ion is picked up in Gnosis, in which the initial boundless deity emanates from himself a series of 30 ions. The Gnostic emanation of the ions is another amplification or elaboration of this rich, complex psychic organism that Jung writes about. Hans Jonas describes the role of the term ion in Gnosticism. Quote, "In invisible and nameless heights, there was a perfect eon pre-existent. His name is forebeginning, forefather, and abyss. This is the original primordial deity named Ion. No thing can comprehend him. Through immeasurable eternities, he has remained in profoundest repose. With him was thought, also called grace and silence. And once this abyss took thought to project out of himself the beginning of all things, and he sank this project like a seed into the womb of silence that was with him, and she conceived and brought forth the mind, nous, which is male, according to this, who is like the equal to his begetter, and alone comprehends the greatness of the Father. He is also called only begotten, Father, and beginning of all beings. Together with him, truth, which is called Aletheia, female, and Aletheia was the name of the woman in Pygmalion, right? With him, truth, Aletheia, female, was produced, and this is the first tetrad. Abyss and silence, then mind and truth. This first tetrad is a pair of two syzygies. Syzygy means pair. Further ions were generated out of this second pair. From them came forth man and church, which is again a male and female pair, and the word and life. This then gave a total of 4 syzygies, and that was called the Agdud, the first 8. These eons produced to the glory of the Father, wished to glorify the Father by their own creations, and produced further emanations. From word and life issued 10 additional eons, and from man and church 12, so that out of the 8 and 10 and 12 is constituted 30 eons in 15 pairs, and the totality was called the pleroma. So this basic image was something quite fundamental to Jung. He used some of this terminology, such as the word pleroma. The second chapter of Ion is called the syzygy. One is not apt to know what that means unless one is familiar with the grand Gnostic conception of the origin of things. So the idea is that these first 30 or 15 syzygies was the beginning of all differentiation. Okay, let's see, there's some comments here. You know what else is the difference between... And Anna says, the figure of the father is psychological. Jesus breaks with the figure of the Jewish patriarchy, leaves his earthly father, his family, toward individualization. And in Jungian psychology, we would say toward individuation, which is different from individualization, okay, because our president is an individual. He's an individualized man, but he's not an individuated man because he would have to be satisfied with his life in order for him to be individuated. And Sora Tamori says 2 of Pentacles. Yeah, maybe we'll look at those cards in the future. I see the opposites in the 2 paths in the Moon card, the perfection of balanced opposites in the Art card, Temperance, in traditional decks. Okay, those are Temperance and the Moon are long in the future. Okay, that'll be about 3 months from now. Tonight we're focusing on the various decks in terms of how they address the lovers. And so I'm just trying to give people things to hang their hats on around the lovers. And I don't hear anybody in the panel disagreeing with me about the lovers also representing these syzygies.
Oh, completely. And I think it's really interesting too in the Ion lectures. I'm glad that the element of nous from the Gnostic myths has been brought in too, because if we look at the Rider Waite deck, there's definitely the snake in the tree. And the whole idea in that Gnostic myth is that, you know, nous might actually have been the savior in some way rather than the wrongdoer, which I think is a really incredible incredible kind of, I guess, a symbol. I don't know. The thing that I think about a lot is, you know, if Adam and Eve in this situation hadn't have become self-conscious and had stayed in that state of mystic participation, they never would have been cast out of the garden and redemption wouldn't have been possible.
Right. Okay. Go ahead, Jordan, quickly. We're not going to get too far off on religion, but go ahead.
I think you're muted.
You're mute. Can't hear you, Jordan.
There we go. It helps if I unmute.
Yeah.
Paul Valeray, to bulldoze on your statement, I mean, in a way to support it. Paul Valeray, the French surrealist poet, V-A-L-E-R-Y, Paul Valeray, in his work, Sketch of a Serpent, Bausch du un Serpent. It's a track through the Garden of Eden, only up through 16 Tower, basically. No allusion from him made to that. But what happens is Eve made a conscious decision for the first time in the history of psychology to bite the apple. And there's an indication that that is the individuation of the first instance of the birth of consciousness. And in that sense, there is no negative. There is no fall from grace. There is she induced ecstasy. She decided. And then that decision is the birth of consciousness, just in the biting of the apple. And then they do not move from sin or in sin. They move further outside in consciousness.
Right. And of course, in terms of the snake, the serpent, in the caduceus, obviously, there's a good side of the serpent and a poison side of the serpent, which again is a duality, right?
And the beautiful thing about Stu and Serpent, or Sketch of a Serpent, is the serpent certainly seduced her into making that decision. He certainly led or influenced her to make the decision. But the fact is, she made the decision to bite.
Yeah,
So,
I have a slightly different interpretation on that, but I mean, it still fits with the overall symbolism. I just think of it more as being like the birth of free will, rather than.
there you go, consciousness, free will, and now we can give it semantics or some antics. I would absolutely agree with you, because I'll have to draw back to Aristotle and then drop kick him off the field so you and I could just talk.
Okay, now we're diverging too much. So I want to go back to a different tarot deck and a different cut on this. A very different cut on this. This is the lovers from what's called the She-Wolf tarot deck, and I think it's quite interesting. But what is especially interesting is the discussion of the young woman who put this deck together. Let's see if I can find it here. Her name is Devaney Wolf, and her work is at serpentfire.com, serpentfire. But here's what she says about the lovers. The lovers, Gemini, keys, duality, self-love, a world within, relationship, love, artwork, illumination. A woman, doubled, is almost doubled again by her dual nature, half dark, half light. On one side, she stands on a black moon, and on the other, white. The moons are both crescent in shape, representing the waxing of self-love practices. Behind her, there is the day and the night on one side, and the night and the moon on the other. She upholds Mercury, Gemini's ruling planet. Gemini is a further symbol of duality. Mercury rules communication and going at a pace which allows for awareness of both the inner and outer worlds. There is no man in this card, as is typically illustrated. The reason is because the nature of the lovers is not always to find a heterosexual mate. This is an outdated norm. There are many types of love, too many to portray in a single card, but the essence of the dual female is explained further in the card meaning. Light. Most people believe this card is, just a second, make sure I'm reading. Yeah, okay, light. Most people believe this card is about relationships, or more specifically, finding love. They aren't wrong, although it is not that straightforward. In our society, we are taught and brought up through media to assume our role in romantic relationships as soon as we begin having those feelings. What we aren't taught, often until we're already gone through heartbreak, is to love ourselves first. That self-love is the true foundation of all love. Without it, our romantic love will be full of attachment, expectation, pressure, seeking to fill voids that we should be filling in ourselves. We receive this card. If we receive this card, we are being asked to build that wellspring of self-love. If we are single, we can do that entirely on our own. If we are already with someone, we can actively engage in new habits and activities that will bolster our self-love foundation within the relationship. Shadow. Too many attachments and expectations are being placed on others, projecting outwards, not inwards. Energies that don't belong to our significant others. We may be forcing others to process our processes. There is a difference between allowing someone to help us with our inner journey and making them an unwitting passenger in our karmic car. Boundaries and limits are healthy and necessary. Self-love practices are key to that balance. Mantra: the more I love myself, the better my relationships will be. Comments on that? Go ahead.
I love that drives it right into individuation, because you are yourself your only party, and how you interact with others is consummated in the consequence of how you're doing that. And you can't do it unless you have. I mean, to me, the big gig here to me would be actually to put forth a little bit of a joke. Wow, he's not playing with a full deck. But the reality is that makes a beautiful statement of, when you track through the major arcana and the minor arcana and the minor arcana systematically, and you have a whole deck, you're playing with a full deck.
Right.
That's when it begins. And so I think your reading there just says, there you go. That's where it begins.
Right.
Yourself, capital Y, yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, Nicholas?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Nothing came up for me on this.
Okay.
This card particularly.
Good.
Well, I just like the difference in the way it was presented here. I want to show some cards that I feel are rather superficial.
I would ask, though, your image there, though, of that card was actually very Marseille. You had the two characters, and you had the earth above, and everything that needed to be stated visually, metaphorically, allegorically, was in that image. I mean, two characters equal the all. And so there's a gig there that I think we have to be mindful of deceptive simplicity, because that's the kicker in the Marseille.
Okay, so I mean, and obviously that was evidenced in my Marseille reading, but let me show you some cards that are much more superficial. And I don't mean by this that either the artists are superficial or they're superficial as readers, because the top two were from Melissa Townsend's deck. And I can tell you from my personal experience that she is a profound tarot reader.
Yes.
And she really prepared these decks for herself. The one on the left was from the El Ted's deck, and the one on the right is from her other deck, her personal deck. And so she obviously knows what these cards are about at depth and can read them. And so I don't want to say anything about Melissa and her ability as a psychic, because she's very, very psychic. And here you see in this one, in the one with the heart, there are actually two people that become one if you see them here in this heart. And
I could say that's the dark within the light and the light within the dark, both in chthonic numinosity as self. That card speaks fully of the whole of the situation of lovers.
Sure. And so when you are lovers and you're in this syzygy, then everything else doesn't matter, because you're connected, and whether it's yin yang or anything else. And so the Sasa Suraiba Sasorabito deck, which is this one, also has the spinning together of the lovers. But the point is that in any syzygy, you're not going to separate them. They don't separate. They exist on a scale, and
Actually, what's interesting to me, Skip, from an energetic yoga standpoint, that wrapping around directional energy of the lines of that last image you showed, there's something called the mummy. And there is the integration, which is the one into the other. And then there is the mummy. And it's polarity. And it's the polarity that makes sure that the unification sticks. So that's another piece for that last card, just to get beyond superficial.
Okay, so let me show the 4 cards that Robert Wang likes to show. Sora Tamori says, love isn't always heterosexual relationship. Yes, obviously not. It's loving oneself is the key, and loving the opposites within oneself. But now I'm going to show the Golden Dawn and the Thoth, along with the Marseille. The Marseille is on the lower left here, and the Rider Waite is the lower right. But this is the Golden Dawn, and this is the Thoth deck. So any comments that you want to make about either of those decks?
The Golden Dawn deck makes a direct disintegration to show the two sides. And there's then you respond intuitively in a reading to how you integrate or you do not. The Thoth deck, it's all there, and it's all not implied, and it's integrated. And then you go to the Marseille, and as we've discussed before, it's all integrated, and there's a deceptive simplicity that you need to be astute to look at, to basically inspect your expectations and to read the cards simply. And then the lovers in the RWS, Chemical Spell deck, same thing, just a little more pleasant, a little less crowded, if I would. There's some air opening up in the RWS deck. And Tammy Coleman-Smith, I think, opened up this card to give some room, and this is another topic for discussion, but give some room to the interstice, the space between, the psychic synapse, that's important for the connection of all of these kind of psychological alchemical operations.
Okay, so anyway, in the Rider Waite, we see the tree of the knowledge of good and evil here, the serpent here, in the tree of what?
The tree of life.
Tree of life, right? Okay, so the tree of life would correspond. It's got 12. I believe it has 12 blossoms, which represent the zodiac, among other.
And notice it's on the right. So that's the conscious side, according to Robert Place or Bob Place.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
So
I mean, this card is well, really every one of the cards is rife with kind of a different symbol set. But I mean, in the Lover's card, I can't remember what myth it is, but I know Joseph Campbell talks about it in his Hero with 1,000 Faces, one of the Greek myths, where the lady is chained to the rock, and one of the guy arrives on the island. But anyway.
Okay. Well, I'd like to talk about sort of basic.
That's in Perseus and Andromeda is where you're going there.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway. Yeah,
Okay.
Perseus and Andromeda. Now keep going though.
Yeah, that may well be true. But what came to my mind was also a basic instinct within probably all creatures, okay? Because in terms of relationship between male and female, I look back to the way a relationship is developed between osprey, as an example. Okay, so the relationship that is developed between osprey is the male does a sky dance. In other words, he has to do something that really impresses the female, number one. Number two, he has to build a nest for her. And number three, he has to bring her fish, because once she's sitting on the eggs for 40 days, she can't get out and do a lot of other things. So the male has to bring her fish to keep her alive, and then she and the male both then feed the babies after they're born 40 days later. But and he does sit on the eggs sometimes, but not all that much. But her motherly instincts. So if we think about just the relationship between all males and females, women are burdened with the reproduction duty, and so they need these things. They need to be impressed by the male that he's strong enough to take care of his needs or her needs. We in human society, we have dates in which mostly men take women out for dinner, and so we're showing that we can fish and then a woman, before she's going to have a baby, is certainly going to want to know that that baby is going to have a place to grow up and be secure. And so that's what came to mind when I looked at this Perseus and Andromeda, was just the fact that these relationships between male and female in the actual relationship level, not in the loving oneself level, that's what came to mind when I looked at this card, because if I see the female osprey in the woman here, and she's got to hang on, and the male osprey has to protect her from whatever dangers might be there. And I've, in some of these live cams and stuff, I've seen the osprey get up for a minute, and all of a sudden an eagle will go through and steal their eggs and that sort of thing.
Right.
And so this symbolism made me think of that, and so it's very interesting that it really is deep inside us, so
that's interesting about the eagle coming through and stealing the egg, because then there's the vigilance of the mountain, the strength of the mountain, where the space between has to have the strength of the mountain, because it's not a pause and it's not a rest. It's a space between. It's a whole nother world. And like you said, the eagle comes through, they relax, and they both kind of part off. They lose the temperance of the space between the lovers, and the eagle steals the eggs, and it was all for naught.
Yeah.
But that point of the mountain,
you're all done for the season if that happens.
Yeah, exactly. And then the point of the mountain in between, and that in between space, and that one card is that whole process within the process is. So I'll stop there.
Right. Okay. So here's another example, and this is from the Mythic Tarot. This is the tarot
Great deck
that Liz Greene was involved with. And Liz Greene is a Jungian analyst, in addition to being a great astrologer and obviously a very great writer. And so I'll just read what she has to say about this card. And so here's what she says. The card of the Lovers portrays a handsome, fresh-faced blonde youth dressed in simple shepherd's garb and holding a crook in his right hand. In his left hand, he holds a golden apple. 3 women parade themselves before him, for this is a beauty contest, and the golden apple will be awarded to the winner. The woman on the left is regal and mature, with vivid auburn hair and blue eyes, robed in imperial purple and wearing a golden diadem. She offers the young man the gold of the world. So she's dealing with the temporal world, okay, the sensing side, the coins. The woman in the center is young, seductive, and black-haired. Her diaphanous rose-colored robe reveals more than it conceals. She offers a golden cup. And so maybe that's pleasure and joy or something. And the woman on the right is cool and chaste, dressed in full battle armor. Her pale hair is half hidden by a warrior's helmet. She offers a sword. In the distance stretches an undulating landscape of lush green hills. And so this is a decision between the coins, the sensing function, the thinking function, or I'm sorry, this is the cups, this is the emotional function, and the thinking function, which is the swords in later on in the minor arcana. And so the young man who is holding the wand here is nature making a decision about which partner he should go for. And what I would say is that he needs to find partners for all 3, and maybe those have to be internal partners.
Yes.
Obviously. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say the gold, that's capital P, capital G, psychic gold of that statement. And then the wands, the energy deciding, the swords being that which is your modus operandi of how you express yourself, mind, word, thought, deed. Except deed, when I say deed, I have to drop back down to wands. Mm-hmm. So there's a quaternity here that is interrelated. And right. in that interrelationship, I mean, psychic gold calms communication, how things happen. They all start to interrelate. I mean, there seems to be a hierarchy, but I kind of feel like we only have a scene that has a protagonist up towards the front. But the reality is all 4 are in a circle that are, I don't want to say equanimous because that's going to mess it up. And they're not equal, but they're all 4 interdependent.
Well, they surely are interdependent, and that's what individuation would be, which would
Exactly.
Right. And so here's what Liz Greene says on a divinatory level. The card of the Lovers, when it appears in a spread, augurs the necessity of a choice of some kind, usually in love. The Fool, having learned about his own duality, must now put his values to the test. Sometimes this means a love triangle, but it can also mean the problem of too hasty a marriage, or a choice between love and a career of some creative activity. This card implies the necessity of looking carefully at the implications of one's choices, rather than being driven blindly, thereby inaugurating, like Paris, a great conflagration. And the discussion that she has here is about the Trojan War and about making the right choice, and also understanding the choices, I think, is what we've been saying here tonight. I'm not going to read the whole thing, that wouldn't be right, but it comes in the new Mythic Tarot.
And I would recommend to anyone to read that, because those passages from her are, she has so much good work.
Right.
But those passages, especially for the lovers, are pretty poignant. Except they're poignant in a very verb, V-E-R-B, not verbal, verb, actionable way. She really engaged that card, and I feel in that work she engaged that card almost more than she engaged any other card. And it's wonderful work.
Right. Okay, so then here's Robert Wang's card from the Jungian Tarot, and I'm not going to read the entire book, because he wrote an entire book about this stuff, but I'll read what he says in his little book. He says, the lover, Gemini, archetype of original man, is what he's saying. And it's duality, diversity, swiftness, decision between two alternatives, discrimination, union of opposites. This is especially a card of mental agility and of adaptability, contempt for all things dull and tedious. So once you get married, you're in it now. That's kind of what he's saying here.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Okay.
Look at that card image, though,
right.
and remember back to the Marseille, and look at the unification between the two bottom characters in the Celtic cross symbol.
Right.
To the bigger person up above, who actually kind of wouldn't exist in their schema. I mean, so big and so there, it wouldn't exist. And then further from his head, the sun in the cloud, and then the broken night sky over to the right. I mean, there's this card metaphorically, allegorically, and imagistically tells the story. It just tells the story.
Well, and so what he recommends, and of course he's written 4 books about this, is that one meditate on the card and actually through active imagination try to enter into these cards. These cards give the least direction, I would say, of what is supposed to happen. And
I would agree, because honestly, in my book, I stripped it down to, I may have presented a silver platter, but I didn't put anything on it.
Right.
And so that his deck really does that. His deck actually implies that you do that, simply because once you look at the card, you kind of drop in. You can easily immerse.
Okay, so there's one more that I want to talk about tonight, and as usual, I've prepared way more than I can show, and so I'm going to cop out, because I love this this Divine Tarot deck, the Tarot of the Divine, it's called, and it's by Yoshitani. And it's available on Amazon, and I'm going to show you the deck here. soon as I can find my way back into Zoom. Okay, so here's the lovers in Yoshitani's.
Ooh,
Okay.
nice.
And so
Oh, full on Beauty and the Beast.
yeah, Beauty and the Beast.
Wow.
What he does in each one of his cards, all 78 of them, is he incorporates some sort of divine or fairy tale or some divine story. And this is absolutely my favorite deck.
That's beautiful.
Right.
I'm a little bit enamored. Right, I haven't seen this deck.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say, as nestled as she is in to that beast, that's not a threat. That's the whole picture right there, expressed in that one tarot card image.
Right. So I just want to read it. This is the full fairy tale, and I should say that if you buy the deck, you only get an abbreviated version of this. But on the left, what you see is the card with the lovers. But this is a separate book, which Yoshitani provides that you can buy separately. And so it has all these tales. So he says, once upon a time, there was a man who had 3 daughters, all greatly skilled in embroidery. The father, doting on his children, would regularly pick flowers on his way home to inspire his daughters. But one day he couldn't find a single flower along the path. In search of a flower, he accidentally wandered into the domain of the beast. Furious that this man disturbed his garden, the beast threatened to devour the man. Terrified, the man begged forgiveness, saying he only wanted a gift for his daughters. The beast then promised to let the man go, but only if the man promised to send one of his daughters to marry him. The man reluctantly agreed. The man returned home to his daughters, but feeling guilty, he told them nothing of the deal he had made. But insects sent by the beast came to harass him more and more each day until he finally confessed the whole story. Upon recounting the unfortunate tale to his daughters, the elder 2 refused to marry the beast. Only the youngest one had just acquiesced. She returned to the beast and was terrified by his giant teeth and glinting eyes, but over time she became used to him. She performed the domestic tasks of his beautiful home, and he was very kind to her, and in this way she came to like his company. However, one day she heard her father was sick and begged the beast to allow her to return to him. He granted her permission to take leave. Coming back many weeks later after her father had recovered, she found the beast dying of loneliness and thirst. She quickly pulled him to the river and plunged him in. He emerged transformed into a handsome man. He told the surprised beauty that he had been cursed, but her love had set him free. From that day on, they brought gifts to her family and lived happily ever after. And so this is kind of an archetypal story too of young women who, as an example, BTS is an example where there's 4 stages of development for a young woman, and first they're in love with their father, and second they tend to project out on a lover or someone who does a good sky dance like BTS does, and so it's unapproachable. In other words, it's projected out there, but like the Beatles, BTS is not really approachable by all young women. But then in the third phase, the young woman comes back and gets into an actual possession of the archetype of the lovers, and has a relationship. And then finally in the fourth stage is the relationship of mature love and you know, the full sharing in terms of male female development, I guess is what we would say. So
And
go ahead.
it would seem that then that is the metaphor for full relationship for males and for females. So it's strange to me. It's always been expressed for females. This is what you should do. The reality is, you just said those four things, and they apply to both genders.
Right, of course they do.
And that's then equals individuation.
Precisely. And then that comes full
Master rule,
circle
command
back
of the
to I love
obvious.
myself, right?
Yeah, masteral command of the obvious. I mean,
Right.
that's to me what's interesting about what I find most not treacherous, but indicative is the word I'll use about the process, because I'm very much a capital C creator. You know, small things are small things, and thinking small comes with consequences.
Right.
But same with thinking big. And I tend to have most of my projects being somewhat PhD level things. And then I do them, and then next. But what's beautiful about this piece is what you've just expressed is male, female. This is the process. And it has nothing to do with gender anymore. It's just called capital I, individuation or psychosynthesis.
Well, right. And it has nothing to do with whether your partner is of the same sex or not, although usually.
Well, exactly. It's you. You go back to your Marseille,
right.
where there was a singular, not a plural.
Right.
You made that statement, and I think that applies all the way through, and that's individuation rather than coupled. Done.
Okay, so Annabelle makes a comment here, and she says that this was based on the Mythic Tarot. This card illustrates the lover preparing to love and be loved by incorporating these three aspects of the self, three areas of need, three kinds of rewards. And so
what would those three be?
Well, the three are the cups is the reward of happiness, right? Let's see.
That's my problem.
I may have
three and not four, and
well,
I'm curious
because it's his nature to make the decision among the other three, right?
But we need 4 for 5 to make 1 for 3. I mean, that
right. Well,
I mean, the numbers are dynamic, and they backpack across themselves.
I didn't invent the card, Jordan.
No, I know you didn't. But
so I'm not.
The individual.
I'm not arguing the point. But all right. So here's the card that we were referring to. Okay, so this is the Liz Greene card, and so here's the goddess of the temporal world. She's giving him the world, right? And this is in the four functions of Jungian psychology, this is the sensing function. And this is where our president is at the top of, okay? But then this one is offering happiness, okay, and emotional happiness. And this one is maybe offering success in a career and discernment so that you can succeed in a career, but you really need all three. And the wand represents the instinct of the individual, but you need to develop all three regardless of whether there's one person or three. Now, let me
Skip, may I may?
Yeah, quickly.
Yeah, very quickly. It's very simple. Could you put the card back up?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if this is the most simple point I've ever made.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, look top left, lead, orb, hand. Look bottom left, gold, orb, hand. That's the alchemical process, the lead to the gold.
Mm-hmm.
From them, the Trinity, to the unity of her. Period.
Okay. Well, you're getting way ahead of us from a Jungian psychology point of view, but
I'm sorry. I thought that was a Jungian.
Well, no, I mean,
okay.
It is a Jungian psychology point, but I'm not trying to do that in this series. I'm trying to
You're focusing on the lovers and get
right.
that in play. Got it.
That's right. That's the point. So Annabelle says it's temporal, emotional, and thinking, or sword, coin, and cups. Yes, as we said. And there's one more that has been sort of a last card for us, and that is from this other deck, which is the Deviant Moon Tarot. And I sometimes rather like Patrick. It's by Patrick Valenza, and Patrick has a lot of very, very interesting images in his deck. And so I'm going to share the lovers in Patrick's deck. Here they are. And so he says, this is how he describes it. Locked in the grips of passion, two lovers press their bodies together on the shore of a desert lake. Attracted by one another's differences, they join as one united soul. Each fulfills the needs and desires of the other, sharing both positive and negative attributes. The female plays the emotional role in this symbiotic relationship. We see that her hair leads the viewer's eye into the water, indicating her deep subconscious thoughts. The physical aspect of this relationship drive the male. His eye is wide and awake as he holds the woman possessively in his arms and kisses her neck. Barren desert mountains in the background warn him that he bases his relationship on passion alone. It will be empty and void. If he bases his relationship on passion alone, it will be empty and void. The moon above casts its hypnotic spell upon the pair, influencing all rational thought. Below, a snake bites into the man's leg, injecting him with intoxicating venom. Being so involved in the moment, he does not feel the sting. Soon the seductive poisons will circulate through both bodies, rendering the pair unable to resist love's temptations. Upright meaning, when the lovers appear in a reading, they represent the dynamic power of two distinct forces come together in harmony. Contrasting elements will merge, forming a new and unique entity. The card may also symbolize the need to bring your masculine and female energies into balance. Additionally, the lovers could mean that an intimate relationship will likely prosper. Love will flourish and rapidly bloom into a heated romance. Furthermore, the card could be advising you to embrace the differences between you and your partner. The reverse meanings: when reversed, the lovers signify the forces will likely repel each other rather than attract. Vibrations will not match and synchronization will be off. We're forewarned of an impending split in a relationship. In this position, the card may also indicate unison for the wrong reasons, which will inevitably give way to conflict. Like most of the characters in the Deviant Moon Tarot, the female pictured on the lover's card originated in my teenage artwork. Back then, I made many drawings featuring a playful breed of bald nude marionette-like women. These women can also be found in such cards as the Three of Cups, the Eight of Swords, Five of Pentacles, and the Ace of Cups. The girl in the Lovers, however, is the only one of this kind to have long braids of hair. Okay, so I'll just show a couple of pages here in Patrick's book. I guess it's only this one page, but he shows one of his teenage drawings here on the left side. And
it's a very powerful deck, and it's honestly, I just say it has a deceptive simplicity, not only in its trying to be upfront. It doesn't ever actually get to being upfront. Yeah, the deck has a message, and it's clear. So I find this deck to be one of the most ironic decks there is, because it's so clear and the messaging is so unclear. And I respect it so much for its visual imagery, for metaphorical, allegorical personification implications. It's a really, really, really solid deck.
Well,
and it's one of those.
It's a really, really, really solid book too, because
it is. No, it is. It is. You're absolutely right. And everything about this deck, to me, smacks of, why did you say that? There are so many things I feel like that are apologetic about this deck that didn't need to be. This deck is actually, I have to use the French, la force.
Well,
this deck is amazing.
Yeah, I think it is an amazing deck. I don't use it in readings, but I find what he writes about each card rather illuminating. In this particular case, though, where he is using, in effect, a marionette for the woman, and he talks about pictures he was drawing in his teenage years. And this particular one comes across as rather immature, or
right.
Because it's a teenage guy's image of what a girlfriend should be like, a marionette that he can control in every way, and not a living.
It's kind of interesting that he has the snake biting him on the hill, because that makes me think of the passage from that part of the Bible where it says, "I will put enmity between you and her. I will bruise thy head and bruise thy heel."
Yeah.
Yes, and actually, I hate to put it this way, but for segue, Nick, your statement could be more important for I have to get my German Shepherd out, and she's making that whining noise. And if I don't go now, I'm gonna hate both of you and myself. So
Okay. Peace.
yeah, I know it's after 10, but
we're gonna
thank
call
you
it,
so much,
call
both
it
of
quits
you.
for tonight.
Thank you so much, both of you.
Yeah, good to see you. Be safe.
Right.
You as well.
And Annabelle, I do agree with you on the Liz Greene card entirely. And you know, the question is how does one bring those features into one's life? I think that's the fair question for all men and all women, because there are counterparts for this for women as well, it seems to me. Any other comments you want to make, Nick, before we wrap up?
Well, I had some thoughts about the Thoth card and the Rider Waite card, but they may not be pertinent, so I can just let those be.
Well, I mean, I can pull it back up. I think.
Okay, yeah, let's go through it. Let's talk about it for just a second. It won't take terribly long.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, here we are. Wait a minute, I gotta figure out how I'm sharing this. Okay, here we go. There it is.
Okay. So Jordan kind of alluded to this, and I'll try to save the parts of it that are pertinent to the Devil card for later on. But you know, a big portion of how people study the tarot has to do with numerology, and when they have the cards beyond the sequence of 0 to 9, the tendency is to always reduce them back into 0 through 9. So the Devil card is 15. 1 plus 5 equals 6. That lands us back to the Lover's card. Also, if you look at both of the cards, I mean, they are the exact same setup on the card, just the character that's above each of the man and the woman is a different character.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like that the idea between symbolos and diabolos. But the thing that I think that's interesting that was coming up for me when we went through these the first time is that, particularly in Crowley's card, I mean, there's just so much symbolism there.
Okay,
But,
so Crowley's card is this card, the Lover,
right,
the Thoth deck, so-called. Right.
But the thing that's so interesting to me is like this has everything to do with alchemy. So on the right, he's got the eagle, and on the left, he's got the lion. Lion for Leo, the fixed fire sign. Eagle for Scorpio, the fixed water sign. So everything else is a conjunction of each of those. So everything that you see is an opposite being conjoined. And even you were talking about the ospreys and their eggs and everything. I mean, down at the bottom of the card, there's the snake wrapped around the Orphic egg.
Right.
And but the thing that I think is most interesting about Crowley's card, apart from any of the other ones, is that he's got all of this happening kind of under the supervision of the hermit in the background of the card.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's because so Gemini and Virgo are both of the astrological signs that are ruled by Mercury.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that that's really, really profound symbolism in the context of alchemy, because it's almost like he's implying the universal Mercury, or
do you have any? Yeah. Do you have any comment why there are two women up here? Because that doesn't look like a man and a woman. It looks like two women to me.
I don't. I mean, I would imagine it's probably has something to do, because also like the Marseille deck, he's got Eros up there at the top. So I would think it probably has something to do with him trying to bring together every card at that point. So I would imagine it's similar to what the two women in the Marseille deck means.
Right.
But
And of
what that
course,
is not really clear.
something that's interesting here is we have a mixed race couple, and this Thoth deck was done back in the 40s, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
And the children are mixed race also. Well, okay. So you're saying this is the hermit here, this guy here. This is
It is, yeah,
his
it
two
is the
hands.
hermit. Certainly,
Right.
because there's an interesting way of looking at the zodiacal circle where if you so the sign Cancer and the sign Leo are the only two signs of the zodiacal circle that only have one planetary ruler, and Cancer is the moon and Leo is the sun. But from there, everything else forms like an equal stack. So from there, expanding outward, you've got two signs, Gemini and Virgo, and each of those are ruled by Mercury. And from there, you've got Taurus and Libra, and each of those are ruled by Venus, and so on. But he just pulls together all of that symbolism in this card, and it's really quite profound. I mean, this is a card that could really be mined for a lot of meaning.
Very interesting. So this is why you can study the tarot for your lifetime and never get to the bottom of it, because it really does explain human life, and it applies around the world. So anyway, thanks, Nick, for participating tonight. We'll see you next week. Next week, we're going to do the Chariot, which will be fun.
Yeah, it's great to see you, Skip, and have a good night.
Okay, take care now. Thank you, everyone on YouTube, for joining us tonight. And I will try to put the link. Let's see if I can put the link, the MailChimp link. Okay, to register for this, to receive notices and to participate in our panel, which we would welcome some of you like Annabelle or Sister Sora Tamori and others who have responded here. And Elise, please join our panel. And I've put the link there where you can get notices of the weekly sessions, so that you'll be notified and given the links to join the Zoom group. So I'm going to terminate for tonight, though. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Next week, we will be talking about card number 7, which is the Chariot. And that's always been a confusing one, or one that didn't have much meaning to me until I started to read the Bhagavad-Gita. But anyway, going on. See you next